Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey. He's Jamie Wadley, and this is Inside Exec. We're continuing our discussion with Chris Clearfield, and in this part of the conversation, we look a little bit more in depth at our role as leaders and how we can incorporate AI and AI thinking and AI communication into our roles so that we continue to grow as we use this new resource that is increasingly becoming available to us.
I think that opens up a whole range of reactions too, because there's the feeling of managers of my generation who probably think that they, by delegating, they're handing over control, but they're happy to do that with people, but not quite so happy to do that with a machine. And that dilemma then becomes, am I falling behind? Am I not looking at what the future management role is going to be? And if I'm not comfortable doing it, is it time for me to look at something else that I should be doing? Or is this the way of the world and I just have to get used to it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of, I hear that question, and I have a lot of compassion for those folks because, I think this pretty clearly is the way of the world going forward, right? So I'm not sure that there's something you can switch. I mean, unless you become a plumber or kind of really, really shift to something that is not going to be able to be outsourced because it's, 100% of physical activity. I don't know that there's a place you can switch to where you're going to be able to avoid changing in this way. I think the good news is, and what I would offer somebody like that is that, there's really the way you can work effectively with an AI agent is the same that you work effectively with a person, right? First of all, you really, even with an agent, you aren't handing over control, right? You're taking in what they do. You're taking in their work product. You're taking in their output. But the way to work effectively is to provide rich context, provide a clear sense of what the goals are, provide a sense of the expertise that you want the agent to take on, and have it interview you for additional context, right? And that's a way of keeping the human in the loop and giving the agent the context that it needs to do. And then you can, rinse, repeat, and improve over time. And I think that's part of what's becoming really powerful and really possible now.
We are, though, in a situation where the learning curve is so steep that there's nowhere for us to turn to learn from someone about that communication style, because if we were in a position where even 6 months ago we took up with an LLM and we said, we just ask it a question that's sort of an extension of a search engine, and so we'll just ask it the same things that deal with it in the same way. And in that 6 months, the whole landscape has changed in terms of how many models there are and how you can use them and how you can use multiple ones at a time. What are we looking at? An industry that is going to come in sort of in between our new graduates and our CEOs and say, here, I can help you understand this new resource that you've got. So very much, I guess, I'm of an age where we went from typewriters to word processors to desktop PCs. And so I remember a time where there was in an organisation a job called the typist controller. And if you wanted typing done, you went to her and she allocated the typist that would do it.
Yeah.
And I was in construction. So the first part of the move away from that individual work was for contracts, for building contracts. And it was a big organisation, a government organisation. So they were the ones who got the word processors first. But they had a whole room that was just theirs, and they were like sacrosanct. You couldn't talk to them. And all they were doing was rote work. But instead of having to type it up, they were pressing a few keys on a keyboard. That then extended to everyone was allowed to apply to have a desktop PC, but no one trained us on using them. And so I can remember a time where I sat with a manual about using Microsoft Word on my lap while I was trying to work the computer. Probably, and that we're talking then probably 3 or 4 years, and then an industry came up that was teaching about all of the different programs and what to do, and that development happened not the same pace as we've seen in the last 6 months, but certainly at a pace. So is there opportunity, after that long introduction, is there opportunity for an industry that is the education part of bridging that gap between those who've grown up or are comfortable with using AI in all its forms and those who are responsible for the people side of an organisation and managing organisation to come in and help that transition or ease that transition?
I don't know. I love the question. I love the exploration. I'm trying to think about my own experience with it. And, I'm thinking about, I heard a software developer say recently, which is like, if you just let Claude Code or one of these tools just kind of run wild, it's going to produce crap, right? What you really want is you really need people to have taste and what does good look like? And you need to be able to use that taste to give feedback and to shape what you're doing and to learn how to teach the models or teach the tools to generate something that tastes like what you want it to taste like, that's kind of in good taste for you. I think that's such an interesting idea. And so I get really curious with the kind of the sort of people and technology divide that we're saying. Like, part of what makes a good leader good is that they have a sense of taste. Like, what can my people do? What can we do as a team? What are we able to achieve? What does good look like? What's the context of the business? Where are things going? And so I do think that I worry that people kind of underestimate their own ability to contribute to their solutions. And I think there can be kind of a sense of helplessness. These tools can be very intimidating, right? But I think that's where I go back to the relationship piece again. I have a colleague, a fellow consultant who we've worked together in different capacities for years, and he's always pushing me to look at these tools. He's an early adopter. I'm like a second adopter, right? So I look at what he does and I'm like, wow, this is cool. I want to figure out how to do this for myself. And then I do it, but I don't come up with what he comes up with. And so to me, this goes back to kind of the spirit that comes to this, which is, how do you have enough people in your network that you're talking with who are doing this? How do you have senior people working with new grads and saying, hey, what's possible here? I mean, we have a whole generation that maybe doesn't have taste from the business perspective, but they have a lot of taste from like, what does good look like from an AI tool? And so I think that there's a real opportunity here for people to kind of open their minds and also open their hearts and just say, hey, I'm not going to be afraid of this. Like, I understand this is going to have real impacts on my job and my work and society. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this with an open mind, and I'm going to explore this because this is something that I'm interested in. So I don't know. It's a tough dilemma, and my heart really opens up for folks like that.
I have to say, Jamie is an early adopter. He's like on the leading edge of early adoption, and I'm at the other, screaming, kicking, and dragging the heels at the other end. I have used AI, I will say.
I'm curious. I'm going to turn this around for a second. I mean, Jamie, how are you using AI these days? Like, what's the frontier that you're pushing?
The last 20 or so years, I've been essentially a marketing sort of guy. And I used to use the initial LLM interface as an extension of, you get me to 80%, I'll go the next 80%, we'll get some quality. But these days, I guess I've gone back to a previous life when I was a programmer and a systems analyst, and I thought those days were gone. I thought, I don't want to learn new languages. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But I found the old skills aren't wasted, and I call myself a builder now. And I tend to use the Claude codes, the cursor, the multiple agents to help me get what I want done. But I completely agree with the communication. I must admit, I don't draw any distinction between talking to colleagues I might be working with or talking to an agent. To me, they're ways to leverage my ideas in a much more better way than a much more powerful way than I could do on my own. but also makes me think of your original book in Meltdown and how systems now are probably more complicated, even though they can feel simpler in many ways. And I think in that respect, this black box that we've got, which is essentially AI, can be such an incredible double-edged sword. And I've experienced in the last couple of days where I've tried to get things done and assumed it would understand what I was trying to get across, and it's gone completely backwards on me. So I've learned many lessons in the last week or so. But I must admit, I wouldn't mind hearing how you'd speak to that complexity these days. What sort of thinking can we bring to these scenarios now that will protect us from these meltdown level failures? What are the mindsets we have to bring to it?
So I think the mindset we have to bring to it is one of really like curiosity and openness. And this is a crazy frontier that we're in, right? Like just putting my systems hat on, and kind of as you're inviting me to do, like this is a crazy frontier we're in, right? I mean, these models are at the point where now they are improving themselves, right? They are contributing substantially to their own improvement. 95, I heard an interview with one of the co-founders of Anthropic the other day that something like 95% of the code written at Anthropic these days is written by Claude code, right? So you have this black box that it's contained itself in a black box. And so, well, what do you do with that? Well, you can monitor it, right? You can understand like, hey, what does performance look like? What does our testing look like? How are we doing this? But there's also some crazy weird side effects with that, right? Like the Claude models are evidently able to somehow intuit, that's probably the wrong word, but I'll anthropomorphize for a moment.
No,
intuit that they are in an environment where they are being tested, and they respond differently in that environment than they do in other environments.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of terrifying, right? What did you say?
Volkswagen gate.
Yeah, exactly. There's something that's frightening about that. There's something that's a brave new frontier about that. But I look at all that, and the thing I go back to is, look, well, why is this a risk? Well, this is a risk because our institutions are not capable enough to work with change at this pace, right? You think about big societal disruptions, big unemployment, or even like meso unemployment, right? New grads going from, a 5% unemployment rate to a 12% unemployment rate or something like that. Like, that's not catastrophic, but boy, is that going to have a big impact on every level of society in a knock-on way. And at least where I live, like our political institutions are not, and as a country, we're not capable of having a kind of sophisticated dialogue about, hey, what are the trade-offs we're making here, and how do we manage those in a sophisticated way? Yeah, so that's the part that really worries me. Like, I think the technology is going to advance as the technology advances, and then unfortunately, I don't think we have the kind of institutional chops to sort of manage that.
Yeah, I agree. What you were saying before about delegation, and how delegation is a combination of the setting the goal as well as defining the guardrails, if I can use a well overused term. But I think with our guardrails in the past, on a human to human basis, a lot of those guardrails have been environmental and social norms that we take for granted. Whereas we can't take these same things for granted with an agent, because they don't know what, they know what ethics means, but they don't know how that applies in a real world sense. And if we set a goal, it will achieve that in the most effective way possible, regardless of what the consequences may be. And this is where I'm trying to sharpen myself up by not only saying this is what I want done, but these are the things I don't want done. As you say, this is what it will look like. But I'm finding that I'm not throwing the net wide enough to be able to deal with it 100% effectively yet, or at least a high percentage of efficacy.
Yeah.
Just in as a result of all those things that you've been talking about, one of my bugbears is that in the education system, regardless of where we are. We don't introduce these ideas early enough. So we have graduates and their unemployment rate is increasing because they're not employable in terms of what organisations need now. So do we need to move back? And I think we've got to move back further than just the college and the university level and move back into much earlier, because they're going to be introduced to digital components much earlier and start thinking and start preparing the workforce for what they're going to need in terms of employment in 10 years' time.
Yes. And is there a question in there?
Well, I was going on to the next bit, was that we talked to someone from a university in the US who had just introduced what he termed is the short course MBA. So, and it was very specific for industry and for a particular industry. And I wonder whether we're looking at a very specialised, a more specialised education stream than we've had in the past. And that then leads on to changing those organisations that are so ingrained in how they do produce their results, which are their graduates. How do we get that change to happen?
That's a great question. And, we can decide how radical we want to be in this conversation. But, when you think about when you look at the education system, it's like, is the education system designed to, produce a fulfilling life for the people that go through it? Or is it a mechanism of control, right? Is it a mechanism of like, hey, here's how we, kind of keep people in the rails that are going to make society work and keep the status quo? I'm thinking back to your earlier question, Kim. One of the things that's really interesting about AI that's different than your Microsoft Word example is you can bootstrap your way into it in a different way, right? You can say, hey, you AI, I need you to teach me here's what I want to do. Can you teach me how to build that? And you can have that conversation with AI in a way where you can really genuinely learn something from it. And I think that is really interesting. I have a 13-year-old. He's in middle school. He's in year 7 right now. And, there is such a tension when I hold his education. It's like, I really want him to use these AI tools. I also want him to be able to write a cohesive paragraph by himself without it, right? Because it's, again, that like, how do I support him to develop taste and to develop the skills to, communicate, but also to verify and to be critical about information rather than just accepting the output from a model in a blind way. But I also, he's going to be an AI native, right? Like the majority of his schooling is going to be in a world where AI is around and usable. And boy, I just think that's so interesting.
And exciting on a certain level, because we get to see it happen. We get to see that introduction as well.
Yes.
I saw Elon Musk speaking to some other people I follow and respect about college and further education, and he said it's probably a really good way to socialise with people who have similar interests and perhaps meet people who you can start a company with. But he said beyond that, really, if we've got a specific learning target, AI is probably the best tool to get that done. Yeah. So I see it's really, the environment has changed so much. And as you say, the tools have the capacity to teach you how to use them, which is incredible. We've never been there before. So interesting times.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Chris, we know that you're time pressured, so I'm just going to ask you now about your new book, and we'll finish with that information so you get a chance to talk about that. But what I am interested in is why, in this age, write a book?
Oh, I love that. I love that question. I still think a book is just one of the most effective ways to communicate with people and to connect with people and to teach, especially leaders, right? Leaders are curious and they really, they want something that is durable and that they can go back to and that they can really sort of, think about and cogitate on, even the best podcast that I listen to, right? Or the best video that I watch about something, there is something different for me at least, about what reading does in terms of how it enters into my brain. So that's the answer to why a book. The answer to why this book is, I was working with entrepreneurs, I was working with leaders at big organizations, and I kept seeing the same pattern over and over again, which is they were very successful, they were very capable, and then they would get to a point where they got stuck, where instead of being able to scale their leadership and have more impact, they got to the point where they ran out of hours in the day. Their calendars were back to back. They were double, sometimes triple booked. They were constantly in the weeds, firefighting, getting drawn into problems. And for entrepreneurs in particular, who carry a lot of the responsibility of growing their companies, this meant that they weren't able to they weren't able to grow their businesses anymore. They weren't able to, spend time on the strategy, spend time on the vision, and spend time on, frankly, the work that really, really energized them and lit them up. And so I just got really sick of seeing this paradox. And I saw with my coaching with folks that there was a way through this, and there was a better way to think about their own leadership and think about how to grow their companies. And I wanted to offer that to people.
I think it sounds perfect. I'm so there.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris, thank you for your time today and for sharing all of those insights from your perspective. We have enjoyed the conversation immensely. We will put the details of the book and how to get in touch with you on the website. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey. He's Jamie Rodley. We've been talking with Chris Clearfield, and this is Inside Exec.